How are you? How are you post-COVID?
I'm very tired. Very tired. Might not be my usual bouncy, happy self.
Oh, well, I appreciate you coming along today to help co-host this show that we co-host.
I appreciate you not laughing when I said I'm normally bouncy and happy.
You are normally bouncy and happy. You are. It wasn't great. The whole COVID thing.
No, it was not a pleasant experience.
Yeah.
Thumbs down, would not recommend.
Definitely not. Yeah, so we'll see how far we get, how many sentences I can construct and then make come out of mouth.
You've made a very positive start.
How many names I forget. You see, it started already with the words that don't come. I'm not sure where the menopause starts and COVID starts with me, to be honest, but I'm just going to blame COVID.
Okay, that sounds fair. Me too. And the menopause.
So where do you want to start? Gatekeeping.
I think it's a difficult... It shouldn't be a difficult conversation, but it feels like it is a difficult conversation. I've noticed, by the way, that I say it feels like an awful lot. That's my bingo card entry. That's my unintentional catchphrase. Gatekeeping should be fairly straightforward. It's not a good thing. Yet, I guess there's elements where it's not so much gatekeeping, but there needs to be barriers, right?
Yeah, there does. And you're right, it's how far do we put barriers in place before we then start being accused of gatekeeping? And then how far do we open those gates and let people in? Then does that become a massive free-for-all? And there's no discipline there. And so, for me, the opposite of gatekeeping is key mastery. So gatekeepers and key masters.
And I'm the pop culture one, and yet you've gone straight to a Ghostbusters reference. That's amazing. Well, should we, before we get into that, should we start talking about why gatekeeping is bad?
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. So in the olden days, right, I'm only talking about the olden days as far as the 19th century goes.
Okay, so I thought you were going to say the 90s. I was like the kids are kind of like, oh my God, you lived in the olden days, the 1990s. Right.
Oh no, yeah, God, I remember the day when one of them said, what year were you born in? And I said, no, I said the year I was born in, and obviously it starts with a 19, and they went, 19! 19! Like they could not comprehend of anybody that had a date of birth with 19 and not 20 in it.
Bloody kids. But you you were saying the 19th century.
The 19th century.
So actual relative olden days.
Yeah. What happened then, well, there was almost like a resurgence of the esoteric round about the 19th century. And a lot of influential groups, secret groups, so like the Freemasons, for example, started to dabble in the esoteric. They started to produce tarot cards. In fact, one of the decks, the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, kind of spilled out of this movement that was going on at the time. And Arthur Waite obviously was the curator and Pamela Coleman Smith was the artist. But together, these sort of groups of people was sort of popping up all over Europe, all over America, and they were kind of dabbling in the esoteric. But because they had come from this background of secret handshakes and funny initiation ceremonies and stuff, it sort of put the barrier up, and you had to progress through they had like a degree system or a rank system. Like if you were in the army, there was ranks, and if you work in the public sector, you have these levels of qualification that you go through, and all of this stuff existed in this esoteric world, and so that is where some of the bad gatekeeping comes from. And I say this because Pamela Coleman Smith, she was the artist who created the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the tarot card deck. She did not advance through these ranks. I'm not saying it's because she was a woman, but it's because she was a woman. And Arthur Waite and all of his friends, they were the ones that were gatekeeping, stopping certain individuals, usually females, from excelling in this esoteric system, which, to be honest, they made up. There's no what they call like a regulatory body for esotericism. Nobody's sitting there deciding what the policies are, what the regulations are, because you can just make it up, and they did. So they made it up, and they decided that these were the initiation rites, we're going to extend initiations to these groups. Oh, you wanted to be a higher rank than this guy? Oh, sorry, you can't be. So they just made it all up. So gatekeeping, bad gatekeeping, came in to sort of consciousness round about the 19th century, and we still see this dribs and drabs, because out of the 19th century came the Golden Dawn, came Thelema, which is another religion, then came Wicca, which is another religion, which kind of put these rank systems and these degree systems in place. So they're made up. These are made up systems. Who gets to decide you're more qualified, you're more experienced? It depends on this system, which was made up. I mean, I know all initiations and degree systems.
Education generally, it's made up by someone, right?
It is, but most mainstream education, like if you want to be a doctor, you want to be a lawyer, there is a curriculum. But there's no curriculum for the esoteric. There's no curriculum for magic. There's no curriculum for, how to be a witch. There just isn't. So who gets to decide how qualified you are depends on your teacher, basically. But it's probably worth pointing out that before the 19th century, so way back in the Middle Ages and stuff, gatekeeping was put in place as a kind of a form of protection for obvious reasons. The people that were practicing magic in the Middle Ages, when quite possibly it was very risky to do that. So if you had someone in your town who you would go to for charms and herbs and medicine, you would want to protect that individual. That individual would quite possibly want to protect that they know certain things, because it was all a bit, you're probably going to end up getting killed for knowing how to rub a dock leaf on a stinging nettle, whatever. So they were gatekeeping their own community, and that's fair. Oftentimes the leading source of medicine and midwifery and all of this stuff was a woman, and that's the only way they got to make any money back in the day. So they're protecting their knowledge for that reason as well. So gatekeeping, bad, but comes from a good place if you look at it through that lens as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that doesn't sound too much like gatekeeping, more protecting your IP.
Yes, we would say it as protecting your intellectual property these days.
I've got an industry here, and I'm protecting it from other people stealing it or trying to do the things that I do, less qualified people doing the thing that I do, it not working, and then me getting a bad name. But within the context of, the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
And then the 19th century, so many pop culture references firing off with that 19th century thing. The biggest one being The Simpsons and the whatever it was, secret society that Homer wanted to join.
God,
was it the stonemasons or stonemakers or something like that?
Yeah, they were the stonemasons.
That's right. And they had a hierarchy based on the order in which you joined, nothing else, that sort of thing. And then started gatekeeping because Homer wanted them to do different things. And so it became like the No Homers Club instead, stuff like that. Anyway, not quite the same. But I do picture that sort of the esoteric stuff that you were talking about, a more ceremonial approach with the, you talked about the handshakes, but the robes and the kind of the chanting and the stuff in a basement, sort of like some kind of big Gothic architecture. Very much thinking now of the Netflix adaptation of Neil Gaiman's The Sandman, which starts off with them chanting and doing their esoteric magic in the basement, trying to ensnare death, and ending up capturing Dream instead, which is the whole point of this beginning of the story.
Okay, so we can talk about that on the Sandman podcast.
I bet there's like 1 million of them.
I bet there is.
But that's what I mean. So it's just helping me contextualize what you're describing. So it's that kind of ceremonial magic, and that does. I mean, it's depicted in a way that it is very much as well. Only certain people can be in it, only certain people can do it. Other people are waiting outside to see the output and things like that. They have to bugger off, that sort of thing. E for explicit.
Don't worry. The E for explicit, you can mark that on your on the technology that supports.
I know I don't have to say it.
But you do.
It's a compulsion. So I guess I recognise that sort of bad gatekeeping from the past, and I think there is still bad gatekeeping now, certainly in pop culture.
Okay.
I mean, so the latest season of Stranger Things had some iconic moments involving old songs, including Metallica's Master of Puppets, which was played on guitar by one of the characters, which led to a whole new generation of people discovering Metallica and wanting to know more and going, oh, this song was really good.
Right.
But then hardcore old Metallica fans saying, no, you can't have it. This isn't for you. You only like it because of Stranger Things.
Right.
Get to,
Yeah.
And then Metallica themselves coming out saying, doesn't matter where you find it. The point is that you found it. That's what's important. There is no gatekeeping. But it's that kind of, and that happens in the gaming industry, wider pop culture, particularly, your example about the tarot deck and stuff like that, directed to women, because why is this for you? Women's football, why you can't be a footballer because it's a men's thing. You can't come and watch football. Why are you here watching a Premier League team? It's a man's football team. It's a man's realm. That kind of utter bullshit. Yes. Basically, it exists. And so generally speaking, gatekeeping is seen as being a bad thing.
Yes, generally.
But you also touched on education and hierarchy and ability to practice, and that doesn't feel like a bad thing, in that you don't run before you can walk, you don't try cases in court when you haven't been to law school unless you're in Suits TV show. You have to learn how to do this sort of stuff. And someone who wants to learn about magical practice isn't going to say, I want to learn about magical practice, and then expect the next day to be able to do these really complicated, potentially astral magic or ceremonial magic type things without understanding the basics and the fundamentals. That's not gatekeeping. That's helping people learn, right?
Well, that's what I think. I don't think it's gatekeeping if you want to mentor someone. You are not saying, this is not for you, but what you are saying is, yes, this is for you, please come inside and I will help you. That's not gatekeeping, no. However, you probably won't appreciate the amount of entitlement that goes on in the internet, or maybe you will. You've met the internet, right?
So you said the internet, so yes, I think I do.
You've met the internet.
Everything is for everybody, and anyone who says otherwise is wrong.
Yeah, it can be quite toxic to anybody who, like us, we've got a school aspect to what we do. We've created a curriculum. Yeah, of course, it's made up, but it's made up off the back of many decades of experience. And so we offer the school. We're not saying this is just for me and you're just going to have to guess as to why we do what we do. No, we don't say that, but what we do say, and so many people do this, it's not weird for us to be doing this, but so many other people want to share their knowledge and teach others how to do it. Unfortunately, we live in a world where copyright exists, where people are litigious, the internet has made everything so open. There are unscrupulous people out there that will steal your content. And, there are bots that can go in, even our school. There are bots that can go into the place where we host it, scrape the data, and put it on something else and charge whatever they want, or maybe not charge anything. But that technology exists. And it's just the entitlement of people. You know how like people, when they pirate music and they pirate movies, it's just that, but for this industry. And I don't see it as gatekeeping to want to teach others how to do it safely, and protect the intellectual property at the same time. Is it Taylor Swift that doesn't want, is it Spotify? I can't remember the artist, but maybe you'll tell me. There was an artist who didn't want their music to appear on a streaming service because it meant that was an impact on their revenue or something like that. But, if these other industries are allowed to protect their knowledge and their curriculum and their skills and what they can offer, why shouldn't our industry? I mean, it's not, when I say the word industry, it's not even a recognised industry, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So, and then obviously the flip side of gatekeeping is the key mastery part of it, where people feel entitled to have access to that because the esoteric world, it's not regulated. There aren't any policies. Anybody can access information on the internet and spend an hour reading about tarot and call themselves a tarot card reader and set up a whole service for readings and all the rest of it. That is possible. You can do that. Whether you should is a whole nother episode, I think. But it's gatekeeping versus key mastery. And I think the important thing to remember is that the undercurrent, the foundation for what I think identifies you as a gatekeeper or a key master is manipulation. I think if you are trying to protect your thing and it comes from a place of manipulation, like in the 19th century with the Freemasons when they set up the Golden Dawn and they decided who could be what level, or the Simpsons with the stonemasons, they decided who could be what level. That comes from a place of manipulation. There's no rhyme or reason why Pamela Coleman Smith could not graduate through the system. It was just a manipulation, and that's mean, and that is the bit that's wrong. Same with key mastery. If you're coming at this from an angle of, well, I demand, it is my right to have, why won't you blah blah blah, that's manipulative. Don't be a dick. Don't be a dick on the internet.
Good luck with that message. Yeah, I think the key bit, no pun intended for me, is in key mastery that it's mastery, isn't it? So you're saying, you know, I don't know, it's difficult because you're almost saying, like, you know, you need to understand certain aspects before you can unlock the next bit. A bit like gaming, you know, you have to complete this task before you can unlock the next level. That sort of thing. Which that sounds reasonable, but then, as you say, people are like, no, I want a cheat code.
Yes.
Give me a cheat code so I can bypass all of this and I can unlock everything and just do it all at once, which is, you know, not good. As well as gatekeeping from that perspective, which isn't really gatekeeping, it's more just kind of to help people learn through levels, I guess, and education. But some might perceive it to be gatekeeping because of the entitlement. There are also areas that should be closed off, right? Because there's stuff around cultural appropriation, certain types of magic that are practiced by certain communities that, you know, shouldn't really be available to just anybody.
Yeah.
And some people might want to, I mean, you'll have to explain this a bit to me, but I understand that certain people or groups want to run what's like closed practice.
Yeah.
And so by definition, it's closed. It's not available to everybody.
Yeah.
So can you explain a bit? I mean, I understand the notion of cultural appropriation and that being a bad thing. I don't know if you want to get into some of the elements of magic and where that might apply, but also the notion of a closed practice and what that might be.
I'm trying to be very sensitive and very delicate here, because there is this whole other sub thing that bubbles underneath. I'm a white person, and so I've been born with certain privilege, certain advantages, and from my perspective, I don't experience the same, not difficulties, but I don't experience the same challenges as other people in this community. So I will just open with that, and I'm not the expert on closed practices, what it feels like to be part of a closed community. I'm not the expert at that at all. There will be so many other people who are much wiser than me and have so many more stories than I have to be able to get into the depth of all of that. But what I do understand of closed practice is that it's to protect a community and the way that they sort of approach their spirituality. It's intrinsic to the community. And a great example of communities that have closed practice would be like Indigenous North Americans who have closed practices for very good reasons, and you don't get to practice their ceremonies unless you're invited in and you're taught how to do it with the right people, with those elders, with those leaders of those communities. That is kind of where the closed practice comes from, and it's closed because that community has decided, you know what, white people, we're sick of your bullshit. You've told us that we can't harvest these cacti for medicine. You've told us that we can't use this herb for our practice, and yet you're coming in and you're growing it commercially and you're selling it for $10, and yet we can't use it. What the fuck, yo? So they've kind of decided, and rightly so, because they've fought for their rights to have certain herbs and plants excluded from the drug laws, and it's taken those communities so long to have their basic and this is North America, this is in some parts of the States where, so ironic, States was founded on religious freedom, and yet it seems to be religious freedom for certain people and not others. So
that's another podcast.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously I'm not American. I'm from the north of England. Yay. But, you know, I only know a tiny, tiny little bit. So that's kind of what a closed practice is and why they should exist. Because communities have been oppressed and they've fought hard to get their community, to get the way that they practice on an equal footing, basically, to anyone else who just wants to build a church or whatever in the town, and no one bats an eyelid. And it's like, well, do you know what? That's right, that community gets to own that bit that they believe in just for themselves. That's fine. And what really creams my corn is when you see things that are for sale, that use ingredients that are so rare and precious, and they actually mean things to certain communities, and other practitioners might just come along and go, oh, well, it said on Google that I need to use that, so I'm just going to use it. People not giving enough thought as to where the magic that they practice really comes from. I think you should research it. It is on the internet. I mean, the internet can be positive in that it's a free tool. It's free at the point of access. You don't have to pay for it. You could just educate yourselves on why this herb, maybe use a different thing. Just saying. But it's the whole entitlement, I've read about closed practice. I've read on how to run this particular ceremony that really only exists in this closed practice. There was an article on Reddit, so I can do it now. It's like, well, that's not really an invitation to participate in that ceremony by that closed community, by the leaders of that closed practice. Just because it was on the internet doesn't mean it's now open for anyone to it just drives me mad. It just drives me mad. And I'm a white person and it drives me mad. It must be horrible to be in a closed practice and just see all these demanding, annoying white folk coming along going, yeah, well, I'm just going to do it because, you know, it was on Google. It's like,
It's like I was invited to a Sikh wedding many years ago because friends of mine were getting married. I wouldn't have a Sikh wedding. It's just because I've been to one. It kind of feels like I've seen this, so therefore I can. Equality means everything is available to me.
Yeah.
And it's not.
Yeah,
that's not
and
how it
it
works.
drives me mad. It's just, oh my God, but that is the epitome of white privilege. Just assuming that everything is available to you. And 9 times out of 10, when I see this, it's a white person moaning about it, saying, well, why can't I use that herb? I can do this type of cleansing if I want to. So, really? White people. Jesus.
Nish Kumar would be proud of you. All right, that makes a lot more sense now. Thank you. I think I understand it.
And you wanted me
more.
to talk about cultural appropriation as well.
Well, it kind of feels similar sort of thing to what you just said. If you want to get into it a bit more.
Yes, and then obviously cultural appropriation off the back of white people just deciding, oh yeah, I can have that. That's for me. Western magic is peppered with cultural appropriation, as you would imagine, because obviously it comes from a place of colonialism, where white people centuries ago decided, oh, you know, my country now, I've put my flag here. Oh, there are people that already live here. Nah, forget it. My country,
my flag.
I've licked it, mine. So basically, I mean, and obviously Britain was like the worst for this kind of bullshit. Europeans then thought, oh, we can go and nick some countries, and so, oh God, it's just everywhere. So the cultural appropriation pops up in all sorts of really odd pockets of esotericism that we that Western people practice today, and people don't really think too much of it, if I'm honest. When I, like, just for example, if I was to say chakras to you, what would that conjure up? Where have you seen chakras out in the world as someone who's not in the esoteric business 100%?
What you mean from a sort of like a non-religious point of view?
Non-religious
yoga,
point of view.
yes.
Yoga. That is, so I'm not saying it's cultural appropriation, but I kind of am.
Oh my God, like tens of millions of people who do yoga just to, like, chucking stones or
they'll be chucking their flat massage stones. their hot massage, yeah. Sorry, I've offended a whole ton of our audience who come to listen to our guided meditation.
You do yoga, right?
Well, I don't actually call it yoga. You may not have noticed, I always call it bending and stretching.
Bending and stretching, that is true.
So I don't call it yoga, and I don't use the Hindu words either. I just use the English westernized versions of downward dog and things like that as well. I'm always very, very cautious.
But isn't all right? So
chakras.
Well, no, hang on a second.
All right. I'm going to have to write it down. So
I'm just going to push back on this a little bit.
All right.
On behalf of the tens of millions of listeners that we have who do yoga,
who've now switched off. Yeah.
Yoga developed somewhere else, right? It's from Eastern philosophies and things like that. So isn't doing any of it cultural appropriation? Where does the line?
I know, right?
Where is it?
I don't know, and that is annoying because I would love to know where is the line. And I think some definitions of cultural appropriation have the words inappropriate in them, and it's all about a dominant society taking something and using it inappropriately. And I think as long as we're always conscious about where this thing comes from, how we are using it, I think the line is probably on a case-by-case basis.
So I'm starting to feel like yoga's not actually a terrible thing now. Because it originated, Eastern stuff, Hinduism with the chakras and things. It feels like it's all connected and it's being used in a connected as intended sort of way. It's just spread out beyond the original geographical location. That doesn't feel like a bad thing to me.
No. So bending and stretching definitely has become so part of almost like a global movement in the sense that you can go to a yoga retreat, you can have a yoga class in pretty much any gym, anywhere you like. Everybody recognises what you're doing when you've got that mat in the park.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of sounds like you're saying that, the genie's out of the bottle now. That culture has been appropriated so much now. There's no point trying not to.
Oh God, I don't want it to sound like that.
No, but and I think that's the point, isn't it? It's not that we've come too far. It's kind of like it's being used as intended. It just has a wider audience. Whereas cultural appropriation now is more just people just cherry picking, just having bits and pieces from stuff that because they like it, they don't understand it, they're not using it as intended. And we're straying beyond magic now, obviously. It's very much a case of, well, no, I think that looks cool or that looks nice and I've got it. Chinese symbol tattoos, that sort of stuff. When you don't know what it means, or you've got some picture on the wall that just because I was on holiday in Marrakesh and it looked nice, that. But what is it? What does it mean? What is it for? What does it do? I don't know. I mean, that again feels like a very minor version of it, but it's in the grey area of it, right?
It is, and we always have to be very cautious, very conscious that as Western practitioners of magic, we do have to have a dig and do some research. Like, just to go back to the chakras thing. So in the 1920s, this guy called C.W. Leadbeater wrote a book. I forget what it's called, but basically he wrote this book. And what he did was he attributed 7 colours of the Newtonian light spectrum to 7 of the Hindu chakras, because there's like loads of them, and then the human endocrine system. And he decided in the 1920s that like your heart chakra was green. That doesn't come from the original idea of chakras. They're not green. They're just there. But do you see how this has now woven its way into the Western consciousness, that even in psychology, people will practice this colours of the light spectrum and chakras because of the 1920s, because of this book. It doesn't actually, and he's a white guy. I mean, he lived in India. So do people turn around and say, oh, well, he lived in India? Yeah, but he lived in India in the 1920s. That was not a great place if you were Indian to be in India in the 1920s because of colonialism. And it's just another example of white people going along going, oh, I see what you're doing there. I'm just going to have that. And no, you don't. No, I'm not going to give you any credit for it. And it's mine now. And I'm just going to mess with it. And now it's this.
I guess pop culture potentially had a role to play in this a little bit as well. Because, you know, going back to you talking about Indigenous Americans, North Americans, there's always, in some form or another in pop culture, something that references a spirit guide or, you know, you do this ritual and you get taken on a journey, here's your spirit animal, that sort of stuff. Even Buffy in the end of season 4 goes on some kind of spirit journey thing that feels like it should be an Indigenous American ceremony, and yet you've got the very white, very British Rupert Giles overseeing for the blonde American girl.
Yeah.
That, you know, but pop culture tells us this is okay.
I know.
And it shouldn't be.
I think it should be practised cautiously. I think that, but you're right. We could, there is this weird blend of, well, it's out there now, like astrology. It's out there now, but actually, where did it come from? But I think if you can ask the question, where did this come from? Was it shared with within the context of, I want to share this openly with the world? If it wasn't, I would suggest you back away from it, to be honest. But things like astrology, and to be honest, I don't know enough about the history of bending and stretching and yoga to understand how that was shared in the spirit of openness, whether it was, whether it wasn't. But it's just, if you ask the question, was this shared openly? And that's it. Then just, you have to let your own conscience be your guide in some of this stuff.
We're moving away a little bit from gatekeeping and key mastering. But this is important, I think, with regards to appropriation as well. I guess there's instances where things feel like they're all right now, but had been appropriated in the past, which may actually create a different context that you're not necessarily aware of. I'm thinking particularly about runes and the fact that, you know, that they were appropriated by Nazis.
Yeah, certainly the Anglo-Saxon ones were.
Yeah. And so, but now, you know, that's kind of largely been forgotten. But actually, there's significantly nasty connotations around them. So actually, I know you're reticent at best to use or go into anything to do with runes. But that it's not just appropriation now, is it? It's appropriation before. Like you said, where has this come from? It's all well and good us saying that, you know, we're taking it back, for example, and it's okay to use now because we've taken it back. But actually, there's still that initial act of appropriation that needs to be considered. Okay, so that's been really helpful to contextualize and educate and clarify some of the bits, because I think where we started off was, gatekeeping is generally a bad thing. Certainly talked about how it is in pop culture and how, in different industries, it's not right to gatekeep. But within magical contexts, not everything is gatekeeping. The idea of mentoring someone and helping them learn so that they can practice on their own later is not gatekeeping. Saying to someone, you're not ready to do this now, is not the same as saying, this isn't for you, go away.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, I do just want to mention as well that I think it's probably important to put in place some mechanisms to protect people who are vulnerable from certain types of magic. Now, this is because there is a whole branch of magic it's about sex magic. So, yeah, and it is exactly as you expect. A lot of
that doesn't feel right at all. Oh my God.
Sex magic, I personally don't think should be taught to people under the age of consent.
Or at all.
You don't think sex magic should be taught at all?
I mean, I don't know, maybe my brain's going somewhere else. It's kind of like, putting spells on people to,
No, that's not it. Okay, so sex magic.
Okay, it's not the same as the Red Hot Chili Peppers album Blood Sugar Sex Magic, so it's something different. Is this another episode?
So this
bonus episode, what is sex magic and why it's not a creepy pervy thing that I thought it was.
Oh, but it could be a creepy pervy thing. Right, so sex magic, basically, a lot of magical practitioners will, they're trying to change their sort of brain into a higher state of consciousness. Some people use drugs for this. Mm-hmm. Some people use the human orgasm to achieve the same thing.
Right.
Sex magic. This is not some weird roofy system that has been
My
invented.
brain did go somewhere else.
Although you won't be surprised to learn that sex magic practiced a lot by men and taught to women.
Obviously.
So it probably has its roots in manipulation and creepiness and all of that horrible stuff. But my own, I'm sure I'm probably not alone in this, it should not be taught to minors. Not minors with hats and chisels. I mean people under the age. Under the age of consent. And it doesn't matter how much that person begs, like gremlins, they do not teach sex magic to underaged people. My God, just don't.
I'd also recommend not Googling sex magic on your work computer. I mean, that goes without saying, but still.
Yes, don't do that either. But yeah, so I think just after this conversation, you can see where's the line between gatekeeping and key mastery. And I think as long as you can approach every time you're asked, everything you look at with, am I doing this because I want to control this situation? Am I manipulating this person who's asked? Am I being manipulated by being told no? Mm-hmm. That sort of thing. Then I think you could probably find, like using your own intuition, where the line is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Saying no doesn't mean you're gatekeeping.
Yeah.
It means you're trying to help potentially protect people from stuff that is not safe for them, mm-hmm. or bring them up to a level at which they can practice appropriately and get the best results. Mm. It's not, no, this is my magic. You go and play with your magic. Except obviously for closed practices, which is entirely appropriate. That line is so blurry.
Yeah, I think if you are in a community that has a closed practice and people are constantly badgering teach me this, or even worse, just going ahead and just doing it.
Taking it, doing it.
Protect your closed practice. But you are absolutely right to protect that closed practice from shouty white people.
Yep, that's it.
And that's it. That's our show. So that's it. That's our show. If you liked it, give us a rating and review. Share with others. Tell your friends. You'll find all our contact stuff over at magentaschoolofmagic.com, including our social media and links to the Magick School itself.